presentation that you're about to hear is directed at booksellers, and it's about how to draw a crowd or an audience for a literary translation event. As you've heard, as translators or as publishers, we all know that once a book is printed, it's not actually published until it reaches the reader's hands. So how do we get readers to know about the books that we do? And one good way to do it is through events where readers have a chance to meet the author, the translator, or anybody else connected with the book. And fortunately, here in New York, we have some great bookstores that do translation events on a regular basis. One of them is 192 Books, which is at 192 10th Avenue here in Chelsea in Manhattan. And so we thought the best thing to do would be to bring somebody from that bookstore, Kate Garber, who has a lot of experience doing translation events, and they have a long history of drawing people to the store. And they've done things like a 24-hour reading of Proust. They've had recently did, I'm a Czech translator, so I was happy to see they recently did an event on a new translation of Bohumil Hrabal.
Should be good.
And these are very well attended events, and they have a lot of really proven techniques for bringing people to them. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Kate up here, who's going to talk about some of the ways that she uses the story uses to bring people in. We have a little handout as well to go with it, so you have something to take away with you. Kate.
Hello. So as Alex said, I am the manager and event coordinator at 192 Books, which is a lovely place to work because we have such support from the owners that their focus is books in translation and very good literature overall. So it's a place where we're allowed to just totally focus on doing wonderful things like the events that Alex mentioned. So this is extremely, a very practical sort of discussion to be having. But I do believe that a lot of what gets people out to your events is based on your philosophy of why you're having events. And I think that there are two goals that we can have when we have events related to literature and translation, particularly, even though it does probably apply to everything. And I think that the two goals are, of course, from the most practical level, that we want to get people into the store, we want to have a full crowd, we want to sell books, we want to support the publishers, we want to just have physical bodies at an event. But the second goal is to actually bring the book to the people that you think would be interested or that might not know that they're interested. So there are, on the two levels, you can use tactics to bring people who already know that they're interested in a certain culture or a certain author or a certain type of writing. But you can also then move beyond that to try to bring books from, the Czech Republic to people who might not know they were interested. So one of the most beneficial things to actually bringing people to a store is when bookstores can pair up with a cultural center or a group that's completely devoted to a certain culture. So, for example, we've actually done a few events at 192 Books called Bulgarian Fiction Night. And the way that we came across this was that the Elizabeth Kostova Foundation has this goal of bringing Bulgarian culture to the city. So they did all of the legwork with pooling authors. They were in coordination with Open Letter Books and Black Balloon Publishing. And they have such a strong base of followers that if they are posting things on their social media and sending out emails to the people who are already set in wanting to learn more about Bulgarian culture, then we can get an absolutely full house of the people who already know that they are interested. So that's something that's been hugely successful both times that we've done that with them. Then the step beyond that gets a little more difficult is, what about the people like me who didn't know that I was interested in Bulgarian fiction until the Elizabeth Kostova Foundation brought it to us. And that's much more difficult because there are millions of things to do in the city on any given night, or wherever, anywhere you are, there are just so many things to do. How do you make your event the thing that someone chooses to do above all others? Something that I've learned, which I find rather surprising, is that I believe people often are going to get up and go out and attend an event if they feel like it will be educational in some way. There's something beyond just going and listening to an author talk about a book, because you could, sometimes you think, well, I'll just read the book, or maybe I can find a clip on YouTube if I want to see what they look like. But as Alex mentioned, we had a 24-hour reading of Swan's Way, like a year ago or something. And it was so absolutely packed. It was possibly, the very beginning of the event was possibly the most packed that our bookstore has ever been, that I've ever seen. And we started it out with not just starting with the reading of Proust, which is wonderful and lovely, and there were people there the whole time, all 24 hours, but we had an introduction by Adam Gopnik and Anka Muhlstein, who have both written about Proust. And it was just such there was the energy of thinking, we're going to learn things from Adam Gopnik and Anka Muhlstein about Proust. And it was just absolutely packed. And I found it somewhat surprising and really beautiful. So the educational aspect is very interestingly important. Also, something that I think we know works, and sometimes, at least I'm hesitant to always play this card, but there are genuinely literary celebrities out there. And if you can have a literary celebrity interview an author coming from, Romania or France or South Africa, you'll get people into your event. And this isn't specifically in translation, but it was an international author. We hosted Ivan Vladislavic, who is published by And Other Stories, and he's a South African author. And the publisher had Teju Cole do the introduction to the book, so we requested that Teju Cole, who is a big fan of this author, could interview the author at the store. And it was just unbelievably full. I mean, it was an author I wasn't familiar with before until they had published him. And it was wonderful. And I think that sometimes you can start, the problem is sometimes you can start focusing on just getting bodies in and saying like, oh, we'll get a superstar to interview this person so that we can just sell a lot of books, But then if they're not really genuinely interested in the author, it won't be a good event, and then it will be disappointing. But because it was so closely connected with Teju Cole, for example, being so interested in this author's work, it was just absolutely fabulous. So that is probably the easiest way to get people into your store. And then, a bunch of people who had no idea who this South African author was now are reading his works and buying other works by him. So that's a wonderful long-term effect that comes from that. Also, I think that it's very important to do events that relate to what your customers are interested in the way that you know what sells in your store. So perhaps you're always selling, any French novel that's translated is going to sell from your store. That's a good idea to do French events because you have customers who are already interested in that. At the same time, though, as with curating a collection for your bookstore, you want to go beyond what people already are interested in. So that's when you have to pull out the tactics to be effective to get people in. But also, I think in all events when we're trying to get people to attend, there are all of the ways we can use our social media and our Twitter and our emails that we send out, and in-store flyers and advertising. And I think that my favorite thing is when you have flyers in store and you have little handouts that you can give to your customers when they're purchasing things related to the book, or if they're people that you've come who are regulars that you know would be interested in a certain event. And it's just something that we started recently doing at the store, is having like small bookmark size takeaway flyers of upcoming events. And we can tell the people who will be interested. So when we had our Bohumil Hrabal event that Alex mentioned, in the weeks or month before the event, if someone bought Ivan Klima's memoir from the store, I'd give them a flyer and say, you should come to this event because if you're interested in Czech literature and culture, it's going to be the best. So that has, that's a very small sort of, you might get one or two people that way, but those people might bring friends. And it creates an environment where people are interacting with your events. So they're thinking they're doing events that are related to things that I'm interested in. Maybe I'll keep up with what they're doing for events more frequently. And also, very practically subtle things in your bookstore are having window displays related to an event book. So if you have a Romanian author coming to your store or translator, having window displays that are very focused on literature from that country, history from that country, creating an environment where people are going to even subconsciously start thinking about that part of the world. Which not only, once again, isn't just a matter of who comes to your event, it's a matter of using your event as a way to promote something. Because you're not hosting an event just to get people into the store. You're hosting an event because you believe that the world, or that our city, our country should be more familiar with this part of the world. I also think on social media sometimes, and I'm not always as good at keeping up with tweeting and Facebooking and doing all of these things. But I think sometimes when you're not a person or a store or a community who is really extremely comfortable with using those outlets a lot, sometimes a bookstore can start just being a promotion tool, in the way that you'll just keep posting over and over again, like, hey, come this Saturday, we're having this event with this author. But I think that there are really wonderful things that you can do on social media to make it more intriguing, to give, to not only link to reviews of this author or link to the author's blog or various things that are not just telling your customers to come, or link to something about, that country that the author is coming from that's in the news at that time, and use that as a circuitous way to make people excited.